Hi guys, on the back end of the bit of unnecessary controversy that was riled up by the Shenmue III teaser, by people expecting that to be a trailer of more finalized versions of the game, and really going on to the bandwagon that I was really sad to see a lot of major video game news outlets go, as far as hopping on the bandwagon of saying, oh, here's another Kickstarter disaster, look at this, and, as if the game's coming out next week and that type of thing. And really approaching it, I think there's this mentality now that I'm afraid of, if it infests too much of the gaming community that's not already Shenmue fans, because we need Shenmue 3 to sell to newcomers as well, and I think there's too much of a negative vibe going towards Kickstarter video games now because of too many high-profile failures that I think people are looking for a reason to consider this a failure. Like, they're looking at it as, of course it's going to be bad, of course it's going to be a failure, and I just hope that can be remedied before this game comes out, that mentality, and there can be more shown. And the issue is that something like that teaser is what's really shown in the limelight, and that's all they really see, and there's no thought put into what makes up that teaser and the story behind it. And things like this interview that I'm going to talk about next are not picked up by mainstream gaming outlets. So that's all if all you pay attention to are things like the No and stuff like that. You miss out on all those actual details and discussion, and you just see what's thrown in your face as it's interpreted by these talking heads on those formats. And that, I think, is the greatest enemy of games that aren't just advertised to look, frame rate, look, just great technology, nothing else matters, just buy me because you're told to buy me. Anything that has any actual heart in it and is not a major AAA release is something that is, again, just criticized for things that shouldn't be criticized for. But the thing I'm talking about, I'll put a link in the description because you should go read the whole thing. I'm not going to just read the whole thing over here. You need to move some of your traffic over here and support the people that do a lot of work in translating things. So this was translated by Switch at phantomriverstone.com, and I've not seen the original Japanese text or anything like that, but this is a site that I will always trust for that type of stuff. They've always done good translations, and as far as like Shenmue News, it's another great site to look forward to if you haven't used them at all. A lot of great information, a lot of great pictures, and talking about a lot of stuff with Yu Suzuki about behind the scenes, and a lot of really good things. And that's why I really wish more stuff like this people would read and learn about, because there's a lot here that I think will put a lot of worries to rest, and there's a lot of great news as far as where this game is going and how we are probably going to get an even bigger and better game than I think a lot of us originally expected, myself included. I always saw this as long as the story's complete, the budget isn't huge, like, just give me a good game with a good story, and like that's what I want out of this, really. And like, hopefully the elements come together, but if it's not a huge long open world like say Shenmue 2, that's fine. Like, have some of the day-to-day stuff like the fishing and things they're talking about, but there's a lot to really put a lot of the worries to rest here, I think. Part of it was talking about how the timing with the signing of contracts and working out deals with Deep Silver had a little bit to do with why things weren't shown at E3 and shown at Gamescom instead. That had a little bit more to do with making that decision. And so that was just sort of like a timing issue, and that really makes sense there. And it also talks about how certain elements of what was going on behind the scenes couldn't quite be released yet until things were really nailed down and finalized. And that was part of what happened with the extension of the release date to likely the end of 2018 coming here. And no matter what, it was probably going to get delayed anyway. I think there wasn't really much to avoid that. It seemed like things were definitely on track, but I think someone with like Yu Suzuki's caliber, and I think of his mentality when it comes to games, it would seem that he would be someone who would rather delay something for a bit and try and perfect it if that's an option before just releasing it on time. So I think it was probably going to be delayed a little bit no matter what, but the delay of likely a full year has part to do with the partnership with Deep Silver, because that actually added a little bit more financial security, which is great to know behind the scenes, because that's something I think that was a little bit worrisome, and not really knowing any of the details, of course, and numbers about the different partnerships and what Deep Silver is exactly going to be providing as far as beyond just like publication and what kind of influence they're going to have on the game. one of the things Yu Suzuki was saying is that part of that extension was because of this more secure financial situation, they're able to expand upon things and not limit themselves as much, because the whole project is, because it's mostly or largely fan funded and not tied as a AAA game, it's built to scale depending on what kind of funding there is. There's an idea of course, this is the story it's going to be covered, and this is where you're going to be able to go, and these are the gameplay elements, but how vast those are is based to scale on the budget, and with a little bit of a larger budget to work with, things have been pushed into a larger scale, closer to the ideal, closer to the true vision of Shenmue 3 than what was probably realistic before. And he even said at one point that one of the first areas you go to is going to be just about triple in size of what they were originally planning based on what funding was originally set. So a lot of the focus is on expanding and adding more and making this more closer to the scope and size of the first two games. And he talks a lot too, without spoiling too much of the conversation, because again, if you're interested, I want you to go and read this whole thing over there on that site. Talks a little bit more about the artistic direction too, and the way he went, because he talks about how when Shenmue 1 and 2 came out, everyone wanted to make everything as advanced and realistic as possible, and now it's kind of just taken for granted, and every game looks like amazing as far as realism, and where to take the artistic direction as far as making it still look, and the characters still look like they fit along with the first two the Dreamcast games, while still making it look modern. And he does of course address things like the facial animations, and how none of the character animations that we saw, none of that was finalized at all. The environments are much further along. I think he said somewhere around 70% a lot of the environments, so obviously that's something that's going to be wait till later. And motion capture for faces, once more of the voice work is done, is going to help with the facial animations, and that's something that I thought was very obvious. Like, I wasn't too worried about them. Like, oh, these look imperfect, but I'm not too worried about it. And everyone's like, oh my gosh, you look terrible, and acting as if that is the finalized version. And just, I don't know, this ignorant mentality. I hope this gets more traction, this interview. It's really well done, and a lot of great information, lots of other stuff they talked about that, again, I'm not gonna spoil too much here, but link in the description, a lot of great stuff. And I really hope that this alleviates a lot of worries people have and give you a little bit more of a renewed excitement. And another thing that was talked about was possible game length, and it seems like the story content really, which is to me almost like a speed run with Shenmue. Shenmue is one of those games where I don't think I've ever just kind of gone through the story. I don't think I've ever, even just like my 20th replay of one of them, I don't think I've ever not spent 20-30 hours just kind of screwing around and doing different things and just kind of living in that world. But it seems like doing the main story is probably going to be somewhere like 20 to 30 hours ish. So it's looking like we actually might have something closer to the scale of Shenmue 1 and 2, and I'm hoping closer to the scale of Shenmue 2, and it actually is seeming a little more plausible now, and it gives me a lot of hope for the finalized product that I knew I was going to love no matter what, but even if it was imperfect, I was going to love it. But now it's like, well, I might love it because it's amazing. It might actually live up to the legacy of Shenmue 1 and 2, and I just really hope that in the meantime, a lot of the negativity around it goes away or evaporates to the point where it can get a lot of traction outside of just the fan community, because we're a very loud and active fan community, I think, but it's not quite as large as it seems sometimes as far as the hardcore Shenmue fans. I think it's more of a very loud minority in many ways, and I hope it gets more traction. I hope we get a good retail release of Shenmue 1 and 2 HD to help build that traction going into Shenmue 3, and that Shenmue is able to continue beyond Shenmue 3, get a Shenmue 4 and 5 or some sort of spin-off in the world, or some sort of continuation, even if it's just in spirit of Shenmue. And I really think so much hinges on the success of Shenmue 3 that I really think and hope that it turns out to be incredible, and I think it deserves all the success in the world, and I hope it gets it. And I hope things like this and the positive energy and vibe from the people behind the scenes making the game and the people involved with just sort of loving the franchise and trying to get the word out there, I hope all those positive vibes and that feeling get out there, and I hope people take more time to consider details behind the scenes than taking things at face value, because I think that's going to be the greatest sort of enemy of trying to get the average modern gamer to try a game like this, is getting them beyond the barrier of just that mainstream press, in your face vibe without really looking at things any deeper than that. So the Shenmue is not a shoot bang bang explosion type game, and some people, even the old two, thought they were a little boring because they couldn't quite get into that style of gaming, and it's not for everyone, but I think it deserves a lot of success, and hopefully the parallels that a lot of people draw with the Yakuza series, which is now finally really having a rise in popularity, I'm hoping that's also another element that gets people more interested, because that is something that's brought up very often, is this comparison in many ways to that series in Shenmue. Whether you agree with those comparisons or not, it's brought up a lot, that I think just getting it in the news in a positive light over and over again, and overcoming stuff like Mighty Number 9 and other games of that type that have kind of put the kibosh on positivity for Kickstarter-backed games. I hope we can overcome that as a community and really get the word out there. And again, just stay positive, have fun, and await Shenmue 3, because it's looking like it's probably going to be absolutely amazing.